A young girl with a life full of dreams and hopes met a brutal end in the safety of her own home. This is the story of Cagla Tugaltay.
What if we lost someone? Do you know how it feels to die?
Cagla Tugaltay, who was only 15 years old, was murdered in her home in Fulya on June 5, 2000. Her underwear had been removed when her body was found. According to the forensic report, her killer did not or could not have raped Cagla. The killer's semen was found on Cagla. Not a single thing was stolen from the house. The door was not forced. No one saw a stranger enter the apartment. The murder weapon, a knife, was taken from the kitchen. No fingerprints. The killer left his underwear at home. The killer has footprints. The case was closed. In 2009, a special team was formed on the orders of Istanbul Police Chief Hüseyin Çapkın, but the team could not solve the murder either. In early 2020, the murder of Müge Anlı was also investigated, but again no conclusion was reached. Cagla's file was expected to be closed on June 5, 2020, due to the statute of limitations, but the prosecutor's office suspended the statute of limitations, citing the statements of possible perpetrators in the file. The police searched Cagla's house for years because of this incident. They blocked the apartment for 2 years. He almost lived there, but they couldn't find anything significant. Years after the murder in 2013, when DNA evidence of the murderer was found under Cagla's fingernails, blood and DNA samples were taken from the men who lived in the apartment at the time, but no match or compatibility was found between the DNA of the men who lived in the apartment and the DNA of the murderer. The police wasted years of time and missed the real perpetrators because of their obsession with "the killer is someone we know." There was a shack near the house where the murder took place. Young men used to gather here and drink. This shack belonged to an old man who lived alone. Much later, this man gave it to a contractor and moved out. He's probably no longer alive. The deceased, Cagla Tugaltay, had become very shy a few months before the murder. She didn't want to answer the phone and wanted her mother to answer it. She also didn't want to answer the door when the bell rang. Cagla's mother noticed the changes in her daughter Cagla's mood and behavior, but she did not think that she was facing such a serious and life-threatening situation, so she did not dwell on it. It is also possible that Cagla did not disclose some of her problems and kept them to herself so that her father would not hear and get into trouble. Probably someone or some people were following her, harassing her, calling her and bothering her in some way. The child wouldn't be in such a shy mood if there wasn't anything bothering her. Cagla used to walk a long way down Ortaklar Street on her way home from school. Everyone knows that there were houses on this street where construction, installation, and insulation work was being done at the time. The street where the house is located and the stairs leading to the apartment building are deserted even today. Who knows what it was like 21 to 22 years ago? In the summer of 1999, there was another incident in the neighborhood where the apartment where Cagla was murdered was located. A woman whose mental state deteriorated as a result of this incident and who emigrated to Germany for good was systematically harassed here. She was 19 years old at the time. Her underwear and personal belongings began to disappear from the house where she lived. This young girl felt that she was being followed and watched as she walked down the street. Years later, blood and DNA samples were taken from Şahin Üt. Fingerprint comparisons were made, but the data obtained did not match Cagla's murderer in any way. Müge Anlı made a big mistake here and gave people premature hope. Cagla's killer was both a pervert and a murderer, a violent pedophile. There are huge differences. Shahin Ut did not kill any of the girls. He raped the girls he threatened with a knife. Then he tied them up with duct tape and left them with a knife to free themselves and fled the scene on his motorcycle. He never took off his helmet during the events, so Cagla's killer is a different person. The killer probably acted alone. Of course, there could have been more than one, but I don't think anyone would want to be an accomplice to such brutality and perversion unless they had a serious personal interest. The punishment for this is very severe. If you are caught, your reputation is ruined and your life is over. You will not be able to go out in public. After all, this is not theft or robbery. It's not a money-making business. This is pure perversion and murder. It's a shameful, shameful crime. That's why I think the killer is a pedophile and a fetish pervert acting alone. If the killer came to Istanbul from a city where butchering and animal husbandry are common, he was familiar with slaughtering because he had slaughtered animals before. If he holds the victim's throat at the right angle, blood won't splatter on him. People keep asking, the killer must have been covered in blood. How did he escape in that state without attracting attention? Here the majority is wrong. Forgive the analogy, because there is no mistake in the analogy. But have you ever seen a sacrifice? What butcher gets covered in blood while slaughtering a victim? A butcher who knows his job wouldn't be covered in blood even if he were slaughtering a bull. Someone who doesn't squirt blood when slaughtering animals, which are much stronger than humans and have much more blood in their bodies, would never squirt blood when slaughtering a human being. This makes it highly likely that Cagla's killer was someone with a background in butchery, just like Tolga Kudu, who killed a young woman named Nekla Saglam by directly strangling her without raping her. Cagla's shoes were found in the kitchen, far from where she was killed. Cagla's mother says that her daughter did not walk around the house with shoes on and that she took them off as soon as she entered the door. This situation suggests that the killer may have been the pervert who had previously molested a young girl in this neighborhood in 1999. According to the reports, this pervert was also a fetishist. We know that people who are both perverts and fetishists develop a pathological interest and obsession with women's underwear, belongings, shoes, and accessories. The killer may have wanted to take Cagla's shoes after the incident, but he may have given up because it would have attracted attention and become evidence. The pervert probably took a pair of the deceased's underwear because it was easier to carry. This detail must have escaped everyone's attention because of the time that had passed and the shock of the incident. According to her family and friends, Cagla was a very shy and timid child who kept to herself, so I don't think she would ever open the door to someone she didn't know, especially a strange man. Even if the murderer had followed the victim like a shadow, the moment he approached her, Cagla would have screamed inside the apartment and the murderer would have panicked and run away. He would have met resistance and reaction. The neighbors would have heard screams and scuffles and run to the doors. Besides, how would he know that Cagla was home alone and no one was home? No psychopath would have the audacity to follow the girl up to the third floor. So the killer is not a pervert who was passing by and noticed Cagla at the time and chose her as a target. This killer is definitely a pedophile pervert who acted with a plan. On the other hand, the last wish of her mother, Mrs. Gulnur, is that her daughter's murderer will be found and that her daughter's name will be given to a place that will keep her alive. Cagla's biggest dream was to open a nursery or kindergarten. The department she was studying was geared towards this goal because she loved children so much. Would it be bad if such a kindergarten was named after her? Both the name of this brutally murdered child would live forever and the last wish of her family would be fulfilled. You couldn't protect a child living in the heart of Istanbul in her own home. You couldn't find her killer or killers, but at least you could ease the pain of these people with such a gesture.